Welcome to the HawkCast with your host, AJ Hawk.
All right, Danny Kanell, my actual work co-workers now. We've been doing some games together. We're going to continue as the season goes. But Danny, I appreciate you for coming on, man. What's been going on in your life the last, I should say, year?
All right, it's been a little interesting. But you know what? When one door closes, another one opens. And so that's what I've been trying to tell myself over and over. Now I get to work with you. We get to call games together. I wasn't calling the games the past few years. Feels good to be back on campus. So, yeah, man, it was a little bit of a curveball thrown my way, but it's been good since then.
Yeah, so you're speaking of you had a long-time gig at ESPN. A lot of people, it seemed like you were on every single platform. You're calling games. You're doing pregame shows. You're Russillo and Kanell, the great, I guess, simulcast on TV radio show. What I don't know. I think I saw somewhere you said that was like that was harder than being cut by an NFL team. Like, why was that?
Yeah, you know why, AJ? Because, when you're in the NFL, you realize what a cutthroat business it is, right? You kind of know the deal. And I kind of, in the back of my mind, I knew that broadcasting was similar, right? They're always looking to get younger, cheaper. I mean, it's just a business. It's the rough business of broadcasting. And, the way the industry is changing so much, it's just the way it's kind of moving. So I kind of knew that in the back of my mind. But one of the things I hated about the NFL was no guaranteed money, right? Like all those fake contracts that are out there, you're like, oh, the $100 million deals, only really legit is about half of that and some of these big numbers. I never saw any of that. But I missed out on some money for the contracts I had signed. And the one thing I always ask my agent at the beginning of every deal that I sign, when I'd sign a new deal, I'm like, so this is guaranteed, right? All 3 years guaranteed. And he'd be like, yep, no matter what. And it kind of threw me for a curveball because I thought I was protected because I had a year and a half left on my contract. So I was thinking, oh, I'm fine. Like, they won't do anything to me. I'm good. Like, they will have to pay me and I won't have to do anything. And then I get the call like out of the blue, out of nowhere. I'm like, oh, wait a second. This feels a lot like football. And the reason it caught me off guard so much is I didn't see it coming at all. Like, I mean, it had been rumored that it was out there, but it just really kind of blindsided me. I thought, like you mentioned, I did so much for the network. I just felt like they would value me and say, you know what? He brings a lot to the table. We're going to make sure we keep him on board. I thought, I thought I had a place there. I thought I had a home. I had moved my family to Connecticut. So I felt like those things kind of separated me because in the NFL, when I got cut, I could see it coming. Like they had drafted a young guy in Denver. I didn't play well in New York with the Giants. So I kind of knew those were coming. That's what made this one so tough is that I was completely blindsided when it happened.
Like what? So that I know ESPN at that point that was like in the middle of when they laid off like over 100 people on camera and off camera. Where were you? Was it towards the latter part of those 100 people?
Well, so it was crazy because I had been following. I mean, it was reported. There were rumors out there on a lot of broadcast sites, awful announcing. They had reported it. And I remember being like, whoa, this is crazy. And the numbers that were being reported were 40 to 50 people. And, everybody was talking about it on ESPN's campus. Like, hey, who do you think's going to go? Do you think you're safe? Like, it was nuts. Like, it was just people were talking about it. And I thought I was safe, but I was at home. I was working out in my basement. I was getting ready to come in for the day to do Russillo and Kanell. And I got the phone call. And this is what freaked me out because I remember on the last day of cuts in the NFL, when I got the call from the Denver Broncos office, I knew exactly what it was. And it was the exact same thing. All of a sudden, because on Twitter, some of the stuff had started creeping out in the morning. I was like, uh-oh, it's coming today. Like you knew it was the day everybody was getting axed. And it was about 9:30. And I got the call from the 860 number. I knew it was ESPN's office. And I was like, oh, crap. So I didn't pick it up. I was like, I don't want to answer. I don't want to know. And then I got a text from one of my bosses that said, hey, can you come in? I need to meet with you in the office. And it was exactly like bring the playbook to work type of deal. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So I called my agent on the way there. And he's like, no one saw this coming. And I was like, do you think this is what it is? It has to be, right? And he was like, probably, call me right after. And went in, sat down with HR people, and they kind of just gave me the lowdown and said, look, this is a cutback. We're laying off all these people. It's part of the cost-cutting measures, nothing to do with your performance, but we're making cuts. And I was like, all right, thanks. I don't know. I've wondered at times in my career, like if I should have stayed and like cussed somebody out or like been a jerk. But I was like, you know what? I said, thanks. Now you guys got to do what you got to do and have a good one. Like literally it only took like 2 or 3 minutes, got the info and walked out, and that was it, and never looked back.
Wow. Did you think of in that meeting, did you ask any questions? Like, I understand you're making cutbacks, but why, like with all that I do and I have a year and a half left, why me?
So I wanted to, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. Like I knew there was no way I was going to talk my way back into a gig. So at that point, I was just like, get me the hell out of here. Just get me out. So like I went over to the radio, I went over to my office, and I went in and told our producer, told a couple of people that worked there. I didn't even see Ryan. He was on vacation. So I went in, told them, and then like, I know this is crazy, but I did not want to see anybody. So I like took the long way out, like around, like walked an extra like quarter mile, because the thing is huge. The whole campus is so big. So I like went the long way so I didn't see anybody. And I knew I eventually had to clean out my office. So I came back the next day at like 4 a.m. And like I snuck in like in the dark of the night, and I got all my stuff, cleaned out my office, and I just didn't want to have to hash it out again, like having to talk and see people. And it's uncomfortable for them too, because nobody else knows what to say. So it was just one of those moments that like I'll never forget. I remember coming home. I remember my daughters trying to, grabbing them when they got home from school. Thankfully, they didn't hear about it. But I told them what happened, and they're 10, 8, and 5. Like the 5-year-old had no idea. My 10 and 8-year-old were kind of like, are we going to still be able to have food? And I was like, yes, we'll be fine. And then it was crazy because I told them, I'm like, kids at school are probably going to hear about this. So, just giving you a heads up. And then sure enough, they did. And the next day they had a couple kids make fun of them. And I told them, I was like, that'll probably happen. And, it was a good learning experience for my kids because they're pretty spoiled, to be frank. But like, they got to look at what the real world is like, because it's a real world problem. People get fired all the time. People get let go. It's just a part of life. So I was able to kind of teach them about it. So it was something they had never experienced before. And that was something that set it apart from the NFL too. When I was in the NFL getting cut, it was just me. Like I was the only person I had to worry about. I just picked up my stuff and left town. And there, I had to sell a home. We had to find new schools, like all that type of stuff just made it a little bit, different than getting cut in the NFL.
Now, how long before this did you move your family to Bristol?
We were up there for 5 years. So I had worked for about 3 or 4 years, calling games, going to Charlotte, going to Bristol, like traveling a lot for ESPN and ESPNU. And then I got an opportunity to move to Bristol for a late night show that we were doing up there, Unite. And I talked to my wife, and when I started doing broadcasting, I was like, I want to do this for a career. I didn't just want to do it as a hobby, because some guys do it as a hobby. They'll just do it. They'll call games, and then they're an insurance salesman, or they do real estate, or they do some other occupation. I wanted to go all in. I wanted to try to do it and get to the top level and, basically get as high as I could. And so I talked to my wife about it. I'm like, we got an opportunity. I know it's not the optimal place to live, especially being with us from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Like, South Florida, the weather's perfect. Both our families were down from South Florida. But I told her, I'm like, hey, if I want to make this a career, I think we need to go. And she was all behind me, said, let's do it. So we moved up there. And that was the best move I ever made, because a lot of working at ESPN is being available. And I was available. So every time they needed a story on SportsCenter, they'd call me and I'd drive right in. I'd have to wait for a flight and book hotels. So I was there, and it led to more and more opportunity. And same thing happened with the radio. Like I started filling in on the radio for when guys were out. Hill and Schlereth was a radio show that was on late at night. They didn't, if one of those guys was off, I'd fill in. And so I started doing that, and that led to the opportunity with Russillo and Kanell. So it really was a great move for me career-wise. I was bummed the way it ended up. I didn't think it would happen, but ultimately it really helped me hone my craft, and it gave me a brand. Like I became more famous, which is a big part of this business, because I was seen on ESPN. So for that, I'm grateful. And you see the power of ESPN when you're there. But moving there was definitely a huge part in kind of my rise at ESPN.
Yeah, it's like the thing. Just show up. That's the number one thing. Just show up, be there, be available.
And it's funny because like Golick Jr. gets crushed because of his dad. Like he gets crushed all the time. And Mike Golick, both of them have been great. Like Golick Sr. and Jr. have always been great to me. And Mike Golick Jr. gets crushed saying, oh, it's nepotism. That's only because your dad. No, it's because he's there. Like he lives there and he goes in, much like I did. He was filling on a bunch of shows. He's gotten more and more opportunities. He does a good job, so he gets more opportunities. Like it's kind of how it works.
Yeah, and where are they at now? Because Mike and Mike are splitting up. Mike Greenberg's getting his own show soon, so Golic is going to be co-hosting with who now?
With Trey Wingo. So Tim and Trey, I don't know what they're going to call it yet, but they're launching soon, I think in November. And Mike and Mike, they've been almost 20 years. They decided to kind of part ways and try their own thing. I think Greenberg's launching a new morning show, which is going to be a different feel than the typical Mike and Mike. So I know a bunch of people are bummed. I'm bummed. I always had fun going on that show. And the radio show will continue with Golic and Trey Wingo, who's like, this is the crazy thing about it. I was like neighbors with all these people. Like Golic lived a mile from me. Trey Wingo, I'd see him all the time at the golf course. Like he'd be out there, I'd run into him because it is kind of a smaller community around Bristol. Most people live in West Hartford or Avon. They're just kind of suburbs of Bristol. There's nothing to do. So you kind of see everybody kind of around the hood, so to speak. So yeah, so that's how I know about those guys working together.
What about so you had a year and a half left. I know there was all this talk about what ESPN was offering. Like, what do they do? Do they pay you to sit out? Do you take less to go now have other gigs? How did that work?
So technically, I don't think I'm supposed to talk about it, but there was we did negotiate a buyout of sorts so that I could work with Fox, and I'm doing stuff with CBS Sports and have a radio show with Sirius XM, which ironically, a week after I went to Sirius, I was scheduled to work on a channel that was College Sports Nation, and then ironically, there's a partnership, and it's rebranded ESPNU Radio. So even though I was let go by ESPN, I'm still working on a channel that's called ESPNU Radio, although I'm paid by Sirius XM. It's just kind of very confusing for people who are like, did you get hired back? And I'm like, no, I wasn't hired back. But ultimately, I was able to work something out. Because there was a time there, I was 4 months without work, and there was some times there in month 2 and 3 as I was getting closer to football where I wasn't sure that was going to happen. I was thinking, man, I might have to sit out this year. I might not be allowed to work. And I still would have been paid from ESPN, but it was getting a little bit dicey. But fortunately, we were able to work something out and, kind of come to an agreement where I could do other stuff, which was really good because I didn't want to sit out. I love what I do. And those 4 months I was out, the first month was great. I was taking my daughters to school and playing golf and hanging out. But I've been retired before, when I was first out of the NFL, played a bunch of golf. It gets old, after about 6 weeks, because it's great. You can travel, you can take your time. But after about 6 weeks, man, I'm bored. And I wanted to talk football. I wanted to talk, I really enjoy what I do. So I wanted to keep doing it. So I was glad we were able to work something out because I would have been going stir crazy. My wife, it would have driven her nuts if I would have been stuck around the house for a whole year and a half. She would have kicked me out.
Yeah, well, you guys now you've relocated as well, back to Florida.
Yeah. So we came back. That was the thing. We're like, all right, what do we do? So we were kind of on hold. We were waiting to see what happened. And then this opportunity with CBS Sports Digital came up, and their studio happened to be in Fort Lauderdale, which is where I was raised. And I was like, done. I'm like, sign me up. So we started the negotiation stuff. Then we had to sell our house. And we actually found a rental house here in Boca Raton. So it's only about 20 minutes from where I grew up. It's 20 minutes from the studio. But that's the one good thing. My wife is doing jumping jacks every day. She runs she's in a great mood. Our families are here. The weather's good. Palm trees. And the good thing is it won't change. In January it's still going to be 80 and the sun's still going to be out. So it's a good thing. So there've been out of some really crappy times, something good has come of it. So that's been really good.
And what's good, as you said, with working for ESPN for that many years, you get so much exposure. That's what ESPN brings you because everyone just naturally, I know now Fox Sports and the other channels are trying to take some of that time away, but for the last 20 years, people put on ESPN every morning and just on there. So when you're showing up, you build this brand for so many years, so there's a lot of opportunities after that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are a ton of, as much as you see companies like ESPN cutting back, there are also other companies like CBS Sports that are trying to be on the cutting edge of digital and, having a digital network where people can just watch on their phones and iPads. Fox and FS1 are trying to do the same thing. And FS1 has been trying to challenge the SportsCenter brand. It's going to take time, but eventually these other competitors will start to chip away. The problem and I've actually talked to some of my bosses about this at the various networks, is how do you get away from and ESPN has the corner of this market, because if you walk in an airport, if you walk into a sports bar, like the default channel is ESPN because it's the monster. It's the, it's the mothership. How do you change that? And I'm sure people that make way more money than I do and way more important than I do at all these networks have tried to figure that out. And it hasn't changed any, I don't think. But I think people's viewing habits are changing so rapidly that even the way that people watch and consume in an airport or, bars, it's all changing pretty rapidly. So I think that's the challenge of all the people that are trying to knock ESPN from the top, knock them as the top dog, is to figure out, all right, how do we become the default channel? Or how do we even just steal a little bit of that market away from ESPN?
Well, yeah, it's a weird space, and that's what you're doing with CBS Sports, this whole digital platform that a ton of people watch. It's how do people consume it? I just did a game for Facebook. They streamed it live on Facebook, and it was real.
Did you really not have any commercials?
Zero.
So how'd you make it, man? Because I know you're scooting out of there of our booth every half hour.
I was so nervous, man. I almost tried to recruit my brother to come with me to hold a trash can so I could pee in it the whole time.
Right, have a little jar there, but you made it.
I did. We got the good thing is they ran a little 6-minute piece at halftime, a pre-recorded thing.
Your break?
That was my own. And with with me, I'll take off if we have a 90-second commercial break, I'm sprinting out of the booth trying to unhook my wires. You know that.
Yeah. No, but that's Facebook's doing games and these people, as ESPN's making cuts, to try to keep budgets, try to keep making money for Disney. You see some of these companies, and when you see Amazon, Twitter, Facebook starting to cover games, when these contracts come up, they have deep pockets. I mean, they've got money that puts ESPN and Fox and all the typical networks to shame. So I think it's going to be really interesting when some of these rights deals come up. And they're not, they're pretty far down the road. But before you know it, do they become significant players in that market where they start owning the bigger properties, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball? Because if they do, then it's game changing right there. Because that's what separates ESPN, Fox, and NBC Sports. You're able to watch games. Because ultimately, as great as we think we might be talking about, X's and O's and being analysts and opinions and all that stuff, people want to see games. Ultimately, they'll always tune in to watch games. That's the king of it all. So we'll see what happens because the landscape is shifting.
It is. Yeah. There's some Facebook sports execs there at the game, and I was talking to him a little bit about it, and they were mentioning, in 3 or 4 years, I think a lot of these TV rights deals are up, and they're trying to figure out what they know, live games will bring people in, and then they hope you come to us to watch the live games and you will stick around to see all the opinion shows and the studio shows. So you never it's crazy. You look at these Thursday night games, these London games in the NFL, they're being streamed on Amazon, on Yahoo. They're at different networks every time, I feel like.
Yeah, no doubt. And I was fascinated last year on Thursday night when they did the Twitter feed. I was checking it out like everybody was. So I flipped on Twitter and all of a sudden you see this live game on there. So I clicked on it, and it was the way internet speeds are fast now, the HD, the quality is there. The ease of viewing is there. Now, if you can integrate Twitter, because most people that are watching games, I don't know if you do it, but I'm kind of have a laptop open to Twitter because I'm kind of seeing what's going on, what people are saying about the games. You can integrate that conversation somehow into the screen on Facebook, Twitter, all these social media sites, because then you're watching the game and it's kind of like you're with a group of people, a huge group of people, a mass of people that you're watching the game with. Then you can be tweeting alongside while you're watching the game, or being on Facebook and watching it unfold with people. That sense of community, I think, is what gravitated people towards social media in the first place. So if you can integrate games with that, that's a whole different style of viewing that I think people would like. And I think that's the challenge that Twitter and Facebook and other companies are trying to get.
Yeah, no question. It's just how do they deliver that? How do they get that on your screen on your with smart TVs? They make deals with Samsung or whatever. So
yeah, it's funny because now that I moved, I was actually in the market for a TV. So I went to Best Buy, and the smart TVs now, they have the apps right on there. So all you have to do is click on it, and you've got Facebook, Twitter, all those things we're talking about. They're starting to come installed on your TV. So the ease is there. Now I did play with it a little bit. And it's funky. That's the biggest challenge, is getting people to change. Because I'm used to a clicker. I click up, down, channel down. There's no delay. I fired up one of these services and I was like, signing up for everything. But then I'd go back and I'd be like, for tonight, I'm watching baseball. I just watched the Yankees win and I'm watching NBA. And I have this little button that says last, and it takes instantaneously. I'll hit last, and it'll go right back to NBA to baseball, NBA to baseball. When I was trying to do that on the smart TV, like I had to hit menu, find the game. Like it's just, I think they'll get better. But right now, I was like, and then we're all impatient. Like we want things right now. It was just the ease of use wasn't there yet, but it's only a matter of time. Like they're going to figure that out because I'm sure they have focus groups that are just like you and I who are watching, and you're like, well, we got to fix that problem. We got to make it easier.
They got to find a way. Like it's how Amazon took over the world because they made it so easy to buy something. I don't have to I don't have to log back in. I just go find one, bam, one click ordering. That's why Amazon is so easy.
Because I don't do that much. My wife, I get at least 2 boxes a day delivered to our home because she has that one-click purchase thing. And it's like, you don't even have to go to the store for anything. Like I'm looking in there, so I have like like olive oil will come in 1 box. I'm like, you couldn't go to the grocery store for that? She's like, no, we needed it, so I clicked on it. Like it's insane. Now you can get your groceries with them. Like it is changing everything, the way we do everything. It's kind of scary.
Oh, going back to your ESPN deal, like who does Russillo do his show with now?
So he's rolling. So now it's the Russillo Show. And because I had him over before we left town, we had him over. He actually gave my daughters a really good going away present because he skipped on Christmas. He didn't get them anything for Christmas, but he bought them over like these Air Jordans that were awesome. Like they loved them. So they've been wearing them every day in Florida. But I was asking about them, like, so what's the deal? Like, are you going to get a new permanent host? What's going to happen? And they're kind of, the way they're going it now is it's, Will Kane, Randy Scott, and Adnan Virk, kind of 3 guys are kind of rolling on a set schedule. I don't know who does what days. It's funny because I don't get to listen or watch anymore because my show's the exact same time from 1 to 4, the same time I was working before. But yeah, so that's kind of the way it's rolling out is he's doing the Russillo Show with kind of a cast of a few guys that are filling in with him.
So your new your Sirius XM show you do 5 days a week, 1 to 4 with Jason Horowitz. Do you do that from home?
Yeah, I do. So I do it from all over, but primarily from home. That was one of the things that made it really attractive because you do it. I mean, you do a lot of stuff with Sirius XM as well. I mean, when I was in Connecticut doing the Sirius XM, it was only for about 3 weeks when I was still kind of up there. I would pull the unit outside. It was 78 degrees. It was sunny, and I'd be doing by the pool. Like, I can't wait to do that in the wintertime here in Florida. But just to be able to sit there and, like, have the peace and quiet of your own home at times when my kids aren't home. But it's really like and again, like talking about the industry, the way it's changing, you're seeing more people work from home, whether it's Adam Schefter, who's on camera at his studio. So many people. I saw Brian Windhorst. He was doing something from, home. They have different home studios. Kirk Herbstreit does stuff from his house. It's convenient. People don't have to get up and travel and be away from their families that long. Like that's another one. So that made it really attractive for me was that I could, as soon as I'm done at 4 o'clock, like I don't have anything after, I literally walk out my office door. My daughter's there. And I'm like, all right, let's go to tennis practice or whatever we're doing. So that really makes it attractive to be able to just do it from the house.
Do you miss having that like community feel though, like when you would go in with Russillo and fist bump your producers and see everybody?
Yeah, there is, because that was one thing I enjoy. That's why I like doing about games. It's been harder for me to get out there, but I like feeling like you're part of a team. Like even us hanging out, going to dinner before the game with our producer, director, kind of the crew. I like that stuff. I like that sort of camaraderie. So I actually tried as much as I can. I did a few shows from New York, from the studio in New York, to be with Jason Horowitz in studio, to meet some of our people. But the thing that's crazy about Sirius is Horowitz, my co-host, is in New York. Our producer, Jimmy Henderson, he's in Washington, D.C. at a studio there with our sound guy, Nate. And then I'm in Florida. So we have multiple people that are in different places, which is kind of crazy how it comes together. But yeah, I do miss that. Like because I'd go in with Russillo, I'd go in at 11 and we'd have a meeting at 11. We'd kind of kick around ideas. Then we'd hang out, while we're getting ready for the show to start. We're kind of telling stories like, what'd you do last night? What'd you watch on TV? And like we don't like now. I just fired up at 12:45. I'm on Skype here. I'm on on camera on the unit that we fire up, and it's here we go. Here's the show. So it's a different vibe. I do miss that like sense of camaraderie and that sense of like being on a team. But there are other ways you can do it. Like we'll take the show on the road. So we'll have opportunities to even build some of that more as we keep going.
Yeah, were you ever at ESPN? I don't know. I'm not going to make this all about ESPN, but I'm just wondering because it's in the news every day now with ESPN. With the direction they're going, they're suspending people, they're not suspending people. Was there like a feel around the campus of, I don't know, like anxiety over if you tweet something wrong, or like did you have people coming down on you?
Yeah, there was. I would say, and having talked to longtime ESPNers, I mean, I felt like I was one of the longest tenured peoples there, but it's not even close to guys like Van Pelt who have been there forever. Just Bob Lee. I mean, they're longtime workers that are there. But having talked to some of those people who have been there for 10 and 15 years, they said there definitely is a different feel around campus. Because I think it used to be, hey, we are at the top of the game. You could do a lot more. There was a lot more freedom to say and do whatever you wanted. And then they got bought by Disney, became a little bit more corporate, had to be a little bit more careful with what you said. And then really the cutbacks have been tough. Like I was there for 2 of them. Like because my first year there, my show got canceled. Unite got canceled. And in part of that, a bunch of people got fired. And it was like, oh, okay, this kind of sucks. And then my third year there was the time there were 300 people fired. They were all behind the scenes, all producers, directors. And it was a dark day, like walking around campus, like people are bummed. It's like, this is no fun. Like a lot of and it just took a sense away. Like a lot of long time, like Howie Schwab was let go, Jerry Madelon, like just a lot of longtime ESPNers where people were like, oh man, this is really cutthroat. Like you used to have a sense of family, and then it's all of a sudden it's really a business. Like that crept in. So there was that sort of vibe. And then it was weird the last 6 months because of those rumors, because those came out. Like just people speculating, people walking on eggshells. You didn't want to say the wrong thing. People setting up meetings to protect their job, and it didn't have as much. It wasn't as much fun to go to work. And I don't know what it's like now, having been away 5 or 6 months, but I can't imagine it's much fun when all this stuff is going on. And ESPN has almost gotten so big. I think in its first 20 years, it became this really cool place because it was sports and nobody else was doing it. But then it's kind of like anything else. When you get so popular and you get so big, people just don't like you because you're that, because you're the big machine and because you own everything and you own all of college football and because you're the channel everybody flips to. I think people start to just, that's ESPN. And you to work for ESPN almost becomes a negative thing. Like, oh, you can't say what you want. You can't have freedom of, expression and all this. But I'll say, like, in all the time I was there for 5 years, I was free to give any opinion I wanted. Like, I never, as far as football, sports and that stuff go, they never said, hey, you can't rip the SEC because we have a deal with them. Because we have the SEC network. You can't not criticize them. So they were, as far as that, like, opinions, and as far as sports related, say whatever you want. Now, obviously, ESPN's having a lot of issues politically with turmoil that's going on in our country, so they're trying to dial that back a little bit, but it's going to be really tricky for them to get that back when they've already got so many people that are so outspoken politically. How do you just rein that back in? I think it's going to be a painful process for ESPN to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, do you think they want it to feel like an NFL locker room, to where that's the number one thing that I think GMs and owners, they want to say, like, hey, nobody's untouchable. Like we can cut Brett Favre. Like I was there when we were transitioning from Favre to Aaron Rodgers. Favre wanted to come back, and they're like, no, we've already moved on. Like, do you think ESPN would want that? Like, so people, I don't know, I guess don't get lackadaisical?
Yeah, I think there is something. They're only, because I've had this conversation while I was at ESPN, like while these cuts were going on, I'd be like, in these talks, when you're kind of guessing who is going to be going, you're like, all right, Van Pelt, safe, like untouchable, right? Like he's one of the faces of the program. Other guys, Steve Levy, been there forever. Bob Lee, been there forever. Like those guys are staples. When you think ESPN, you think of them. But even that kind of is changing when you're seeing longtime people like Chris Berman working less, Brent Musburger no longer part of the company. Like you're seeing a lot of these names that were a part of it. I think it's a reality of the business that nobody's untouchable, that it is a bottom line business where if the numbers aren't showing it, if your salary's too much, Anybody is open. And I'm sure even the guys that we mentioned, like those untouchables, I'm sure even in the back of their mind, they're probably flustered a little bit saying, well, if all those people can get canned, so can I. And it's just one of those things we have to appreciate your time when you have it, capitalize on it, make as much money as you can while you can, work hard while you can, because who knows what will happen next.
Yeah, going to your college days, actually. So you were a Florida State guy, and you came in, was Charlie Ward's senior year your freshman year?
His junior year was my freshman year. So when I got there, the plan for me, like, and it's funny because kids want to start as a freshman right away. They're like, I want to start. I didn't want any part of starting as a freshman. I was skinny. I had only played 2 years of high school football. I was like, I don't want any part of being the starter. Let me sit out. So the plan for me was to redshirt and then wait 1 year. So Charlie's junior year, Charlie's senior year, and then I would have 3 years to start in theory. So redshirt, sit out my redshirt freshman, and then start as a redshirt sophomore. So I got to campus, and all of a sudden there were some injuries. Like a guy that was supposed to play, was supposed to be a backup, had elbow problems. He's not playing. There was another guy who left to go play professional baseball. And so I remember talking to Mark Richt. He's like, you're going to be the backup. And I was like, what about that redshirt you guys talked about? And once I got there, I was like, oh, I'm cool with not. Like, you get to be a part of a team. You want to be a part of it. Like, I didn't want to just sit out. So I was like, all right, that's cool. And so my true freshman year was Charlie's junior year. So I actually ended up playing a little bit. And it was funny because Charlie Ward, as great as he was, and I think he's one of the greatest college quarterbacks you'll ever see, he struggled at first. Like, he had a bunch of games where he was throwing 4 interceptions, like not playing bad, like Florida State barely squeaking by games. And they, like, Bobby Bowden put me into games, and I was playing as a true freshman, like scared to death and playing okay. But like I'd go in for like 2 series. Charlie would come back in a 2-minute drill and he'd lead us back and go and we'd win it. And so I kept coming in, and then Charlie would come back in, run the 2-minute drill to no huddle and lead us back. And that's actually why Bobby Bowden started he figured it out. He's like, hey, Charlie's pretty good in the 2-minute. Why don't we just run it the whole game? And so they started doing that. And that was like the turning point for Charlie Ward. And then, of course, he wins the Heisman Trophy. We win the national championship my sophomore year when I was backing him up, and then got to start my last 2 years.
Now, when you first became full-time starter, didn't they try to do like a quarterback system and have you guys rotate? So
it was funny. So with Charlie's senior year, they would do this thing called the Kentucky. Bobby Bowden loved names for stuff. Like, he loved coming up with names. Like the fast break was Charlie Ward because he played basketball and was running the no huddle. But he did this thing called the Kentucky Derby offense. And so what I would do is I would come on the field. Like, he would have a whole unit, not just the quarterback, but he'd have 11 guys lined up on the sideline, all backups, and he'd have the starters, all 11 of us sitting on the sideline. And sometimes he would do it, sometimes he wouldn't. But when he ran the Kentucky Derby offense, it was the backups. So we would go in, we'd have one play, and we had about 3 or 4 of them a game that we knew. And so we'd know exactly the play we were going to run. And he'd be like, all right, Kentucky Derby, go. And we'd run out there as fast as we could, and we'd go straight to the line of scrimmage, snap the ball, and run a play. And then the first team unit would be waiting. They'd sprint on the field as fast as they could after that play was over, and they'd run, and then they'd just continue doing things. So it was kind of funky. I was going back, and most of them were run plays because I don't think he trusted us that much. But there were a couple times like he'd run a play action, like just run a bomb, like just run a deep ball, just try to take a shot. But I remember it was really just challenging trying to come from the bench, like running over from the sideline, straight under center, dropping back, and then sprinting off the field. It was a very weird feeling, but we had some success with it. Like, we put up some big plays.
That would be very difficult, especially as the quarterback. You talked about play action. You guys are like Florida State at your time, like famous for your play action fakes. Who designed that, or who coached that?
A lot of it was Mark Richt. And I should say, like, he was the quarterback coach, so he harped on it all the time. Like, we got graded, like you get graded on films and you get a plus or a minus. And he would grade our fakes every single time. But a big part of the fakes was how you carried them out. And you could not half-ass it. Like, you had to carry them out. Like, if you ran a bootleg fake, so if you ran a toss sweep and you ran the toss one way, the quarterback has to fake out the other way, like he's going to run a little naked bootleg. But Mark Richt would give you a minus if you didn't sprint all the way back to the line of scrimmage. Like, it was a pain in the neck. Like, you were working out just from doing the fakes. But, like, it worked. Like, a lot of teams, like, would follow me all the way around. They'd be like, oh, does he have the ball? I don't know how they couldn't see it. But it worked. But it was a pain in the neck. But he spent a lot of time with us at practice. Oh, in practice, we got graded too. Like we had to do it all the time in practice, grading out the fakes, the play action, how you hide your hands. So it was huge. It was a big part of Bobby Bowden's system was the play action. You establish the run, you put it in his belly, you tuck it, you hide it. It was tough. I know that we gave defenses fits, and linebackers had trouble. Where is the ball? And even this better than anybody. If you hesitate for that split second of who has the ball, and you have a Warwick Dunn coming at you, and he's either he does or he doesn't. Like that split second can be the difference in a huge play.
And all you have to do is keep it one time that whole season to keep everybody honest.
Yeah, exactly. The worst though was we'd run a couple of the shotguns. It kind of looked like a zone read where you'd stick it in the belly, and we never ran the read. We'd always call it. He would either tell me to keep it or tell me to give it. Most of the time we gave it, but a couple times, I would start keeping it. And a couple times the defensive ends just started laying me out. And I was like, so then my fakes got progressively worse because I'd give it to him and be like, I don't have it. Don't hit me. Like, stop hitting me. Like, why are you doing that?
Yeah, the NFL had to change the rule once it was kind of Kaepernick who kind of brought that back on the scene, and Russell Wilson, I guess, the zone read play where I think now if he's carrying out a fake, can you hit him in the NFL? I don't even know anymore.
I think there's a window where you can, but I mean, you should be able to. You can't tell. And if it's a really good fake, you might not know. So I think I don't know the official rule on that about if they can. I think it's maybe it's a judgment call from the official. Is it a cheap shot or was it close enough where you don't know?
Yeah, I wonder. So what's really weird about your whole path though? So you go and have this great career at Florida. You're 4th round pick to the Giants. You play for a while, and then in 2001, you went and played minor league baseball?
Yeah. So I had played 3 years with the Giants and gotten cut. And I went to Atlanta, and I was like, all right, I just need another opportunity. Let me catch my breath a little bit. And I never really had, a mentor. And then no offense to Dave Brown. He was the quarterback, the starter for the New York Giants. But he was still kind of younger in his career, too. So he wasn't interested in bringing up a rookie and kind of training me how to be a pro. So I got thrust into the starting role my second year in the league, and I was so dumb, and just not a good pro. I didn't know what it took. I didn't stay extra to study extra film. I was always on time. Never was a late guy. But if it said meeting start at 9, I'd be there at 8:55. I'd walk in, let's go, let's do our meetings, and then after practice I'd get my lift, and then I'd bounce. I was gone, and I didn't really know any better. Later in my career, I realized, hey, maybe I should get in at 7:30 as opposed to 9 and watch some extra film, do some extra work, talk with the coaches about the game plan, figure out what we can do better. But at that time, which is nuts to me because I'm sitting there starting in the NFL, the Giants have given me a new contract, and I'm still doing the same thing because it worked. That was my biggest curse is while I was doing this kind of lackadaisical attitude, just showing up, just doing my job. We were winning. We went to the playoffs. So I'm thinking, all right, this is pretty easy. But then people start to adjust. They start, pressuring you more, and there's more put on your shoulders. And I didn't make that adjustment. So then, I told this story with Russillo a bunch of times on the radio. I wish I had made it hard for the Giants to cut me because for them, they're probably like, hey, this guy doesn't come in. He doesn't do any extra work. He doesn't have the it factor. He's not a franchise quarterback. Why are we paying all this money? Let's go find somebody it is. Where I think if I would have put forth the effort and showed, I want to be great. I want to be a guy that's going to take this team to the Super Bowl and do the work that it takes, that they would have been like, okay, maybe we'll give him an extra year as opposed to kick me to the curb after just 22 starts. They maybe would have given me extra leeway. When they were probably looking at my habits and saying, this guy's not ready. Why are we going to wait on him? So then I went to Atlanta. So that's a quick Giant story in a nutshell. Then I went to Atlanta where I was backing up Chris Chandler. They had just come off the Super Bowl to the Broncos where they lost. So they were a Super Bowl team. And I'm thinking they got a good team. Chandler was getting up there. So I'm like, I can go play behind him, get some experience, settled, catch my breath, learn what it's like to be a pro, learn how to prepare. And then it just kind of imploded. Atlanta sucked. It was a bad place to play. We were 4-12 and 5-11. And when I played, I'd always go in against the best teams. I played against the Tampa Bay. Tampa had they were going. I think it was one of their Super Bowl years. I got to play against the Titans. It was the first year they played in their stadium. So every time I'd go in on a bad team, it'd be in blowouts. Chandler would get pulled, and I'd go just get the crap kicked out of me because I'm out there in passing situations and they're teeing off. So I actually hurt my knee that year. So I had off-season knee surgery, and I was kind of just like burned out. I was like, man, and I don't know how you experienced it, but guys in the locker room, and I was one of them, was like, man, this isn't fun anymore. Like, I'm not enjoying it. I was like, and the money was really good. It was really the only reason I was still doing it. But I was just burned out. And so when I was rehabbing my knee, I was actually playing baseball with my nephews who were like 12 and 13. They weren't like in high school. They weren't very good. But I was kind of like, I was playing baseball, and I kind of like got the bug, and I played in an adult like summer league game. And I was like, and I had like 3 home runs, and I was pitched like 7 innings. And I was like, man, I miss baseball. And I was drafted out of high school. I played, I always thought growing up I'd be a baseball player. And I missed baseball. I was like, man, I miss it. I was like, you know what? I'm like, let me see if I can do this. So I went and trained at the Doyle Baseball Academy. It's this little academy in Lakeland, Florida. There was nothing around. And I met with them, and I said, hey, am I wasting my time, or should I go? Am I going to embarrass myself? And they said, why don't you train with us for about a month? We'll see if you progress, and we'll try to find you a job. So I did that for a month, and I'm training with all these high school kids. It was like, and even like 13-year-olds, like I'm training with them, taking BP, and I kept talking to them, like, how am I progressing? I felt like I was hitting the ball pretty good, things were going all right. And then they called me, and they were like, hey, we have an opportunity for you. I was like, what is it? And they said the Newark Bears, which was in New Jersey. It was right down the street, actually, from where the Giants played. They have a roster spot open. It's an independent league, which is a fun league. It's a bunch of ex-major leaguers. The travel wasn't bad. It's an area which is similar to, I just played up there with the Giants not long before, so like you'll be familiar with the area. And I was like, sign me up. So I was like, let's do it. And so even when I went, I didn't think like I was going to be in the major leagues ultimately. I was like, but it would be fun. I was like, let me just get back to fun, playing sports to have fun. And it was a blast, man. I was there about 6 months. And it was like probably the best 6 months I had, like just playing ball, going out with the dudes after the game. Like it was just like the baseball lifestyle is nuts. Like I go to the ballpark at 2 p.m, lift, get some BP in, you go to the game, first pitch is at 7, you're done at 10:30, going like there's beers on ice in the clubhouse. You start having a few pops after, you go out to dinner, maybe go out to the bar after, get home around 2. Wake up at noon and do it all over again, like every single day. And it was just fun, man. It was just really fun. But making $1,200 a month, that wasn't so fun. So I was like, you know what? I was like, I think I missed the NFL. I think I'm going to try to get back in. And then this is where like I was kind of arrogant. I was like, oh, I'll just get a job. Like somebody will hire me as a backup. Like I'll just get back in the NFL. And no one was calling, couldn't get a job. And my agent at the time, I was like, he's like, you need to show them that you want it bad enough. So I actually went and played arena football for a year just to kind of show them that I wanted to play, to put out some stuff on tape that I was still healthy, could still throw a football. And then Gary Kubiak called me after that year, and he said, hey, I can give you a chance. Because I actually did the thing where I sent out tapes and letters to every single club in the NFL. I sent out tapes and said, hey, I'm looking for a job. All I want is an opportunity. Just let me make to compete for a job. And Kubiak was the Broncos were one of the only ones that called back. And they said, hey, we've got a kind of crowded camp, but we'll let you come in. You can get some reps. So I started at 5th. I was a 5th string, and it was pretty loaded. But they had Jake Plummer, Steve Berline, Jarius Jackson, Nick Vrolovich, who's the head coach at Hawaii now, and myself. And I just kind of slowly just started getting the reps, started pecking away the pecking order. And Berline actually was the backup. He was like the seasoned veteran. And I made the 3rd string spot. And then right before that camp, right at the end of that camp, the last cut, I thought I made it as the 3rd stringer. And Mike Shanahan called me in and he goes, oh, we're only going with 2 quarterbacks. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Like I thought I had won the job. But a couple weeks in, Plummer gets his shoulder hurt. Berline goes in, and they don't have a backup. So like they were screwed. So at halftime of that game, they were playing in San Diego. I was back in Florida, like bummed, like watching games to see if anybody got hurt. They called me at halftime and said, we're going to sign you after the game, like come out to Denver. So I got back and then ended up playing 2 more years for Denver. So it was kind of crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, a little bit of a crazy path.
That is, man. That's yeah. Wow. Did that when you went to Denver? Then did your habits change, or did you have like a mentor there?
So that was So like Berline was there, who was I think he was in his 17th year. So I saw the way he prepared, but I was also much more aware of, let me show them how bad I want this. Like, let me show them that I want to be a pro. Let me show them that I add value to this team. So I would go in with Jake, and Jake would go in early, and we'd go in at 7:30 before practice. And, I was trying to make myself like that. You always hear about a backup quarterback. Like, the best compliment you can pay them is, hey, you're like an extra coach on the sideline. So I tried to be that for Jake, and was also trying to be ready to play. And what's crazy about it is, so the Giants, after my second year, restructured my deal, gave me a nice contract extension at the time. It was like $12 million. Not all guaranteed. Trust me, that's what I get bitter about. But they gave me a nice contract, a nice signing bonus. And so that was my second year in the league. And when I was with Denver, like, I was a much better pro and a better teammate and better suited to play. And I was like hanging on by a thread for league minimum. Like, it's funny the way the league works, like timing, where you are at the right place, the right time. Because it was just like, I'm sitting there struggling, and yet I was way better. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, man, don't these guys see this? And not that I was looking to get starter money, but I was like, man, I am better now than I ever was. And yet I wasn't valued that way.
Hey, man, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess what is it when you get older, if I knew what I know now, whatever the old cliche type thing.
That's what impresses me about guys. Like, I see Jameis Winston, I see Andrew Luck, Marcus Mariota. Like, you hear about some of these young guys, and that they are ready to be pros, and that they go in there and they command the locker room, and they get there early, and they're like, I just didn't have my priorities. Like, I was in New York, I was like, man, this is fun. Like, where are we going Friday night? Like, where are we, like, 2 days till the game? Like, let's go out. Like, let's have some fun, and not realizing, hey, a couple things. One, you have the rest of your life to have a ton of fun. You have the entire off season to have a ton of fun. Like, my priorities were just out of whack. But it's normal for a 23, 24-year-old to have those type of priorities. What's abnormal is the guys like Jameis and Andrew Luck and other guys who actually handle that spotlight a lot better. Like, that to me is what makes me appreciate them. And when you talk about the draft process, like, what quarterback would you take, 1 or 2? Everybody can throw it. Everybody can run the 40 in a certain time, especially if you're even being considered as a first-round pick. It's which guys are going to be able to handle it, which ones are going to be able to handle being a pro. That would be my ultimate job if I was a scout. Find out which guy can handle it and then sign him, even if he's not as talented, but it'll serve you better in the long run.
Did you ever think about going into coaching?
A little bit. It was really enticing for me. Not the NFL, I just didn't want to go that route, but I thought about college football. But spending that much time around the game and seeing how much time you have to put into the game and how much you have to sacrifice with your family, like 16 hours, a day. Like, at ESPN, we put in some long Saturdays. Like, we had some 15, 16-hour Saturdays, but it was only once a week. College coaches are doing that throughout the season, 4 nights a week, 4 days a week, they're putting in those type of hours. And then funny because I just had Dino Babers on, the head coach at Syracuse, on our radio show. And after he was done, I tell people this all the time, but I don't think anybody ever goes and looks at it. But, like, look at any head coach's resume of where he's been. And Dino Babers, like, started at Arizona, then he was at Hawaii, then he was at Baylor, then he was at Army. Like, he was at 12 different places in the span of 20 years. Like, you're moving every 2 years to get up the ladder. And I was like, I don't want to put my family through that. Like, my daughters are bummed now. They have to move once, like their first move. They're like, oh, I don't know any friends. I can't imagine doing that to my family, like, every couple years to move up. If you told me, and I'd be curious to see what you said, or what you would think of this, because if I had the opportunity to step in and be a head coach and make the kind of money, to have the type of authority, to hire the staff you want, I'd be like, all right, that's a pretty sweet gig. Like, the head coach gig is awesome, but getting there is what makes it, like, so hard. And that's why I think they deserve the money they get, because they put in all that work. They've made all those sacrifices. Because I think I would love to be a head coach, but the process of getting there, like, especially, like, I don't have time now. Like, at my age, I'm like, forget it.
Yeah, to start from zero, and you're right. And you see that a lot with players that want to get into coaching. I think I just saw D'Amico Ryans, longtime great linebacker. He's like a coaching assistant for the Niners right now.
Yeah, and it's just, and he'll, and if he wants to do it, he's going to probably be in like not even a GA, like a quality control coach in the NFL would be the lowest on the totem pole. Then, you do that for a year or two. Then you're, a receivers coach. And then you're, maybe an assistant offensive coordinator. And this is over the process of 6-7 years. And that's, you better hope that your coach doesn't get fired, like your head coach. Because if he gets fired, you're done. So it's just very, very stressful. Now, it can be very rewarding financially. If you can get to that top level, but it's just a grind to get to that spot.
Now, as far as your broadcasting, when did you know while you were playing it that's what you wanted to do, and when did you get into it after you got done playing?
So I was much like a lot of guys. So like the first year or two, I was still hoping to keep playing. Like I was working out in the morning, scouting the waiver wires, like calling my agent every week, harassing him, like, hey, who are you calling? Is there any jobs open? And then I was playing a ton of golf. Like I'd go work out, play golf. That was it. So I did that for almost a year and a half. And then I'm like, okay, this might not happen. I was still kind of working, but then I was like, let me figure out what I'm going to do next. One of the guys that I actually golfed with, like in all these times I was golfing, actually, it's why I started talking to him about a business idea of having an investment management company where he had a Wall Street background. I had kind of a name, a brand as being a former NFL quarterback where I, was pretty good with people, where I would kind of be the rainmaker, like, hey, let's wine and dine people. Let's, develop relationships, friendships. And then, he would handle the money and we would collect, bring in money and invest it for him and have this investment management company. So we actually ended up starting the company, and it was probably 2007. And it was about a year and a half before the market crashed. So it couldn't have been worse timing. It was right around the Bernie Madoff stuff. Like, and I know everybody's paranoid. Like, is this a Ponzi scheme? And if your name wasn't Goldman Sachs or Merrill Lynch or JP Morgan, like people were not giving money to just some new startup company. There was no chance that was happening. So we very quickly realized after about a year and a half, it's like, okay, this probably isn't going to happen. So in that process, while I was doing that, I was kind of looking around, and I don't know how you felt about the media, but I don't know if hated is a strong word, but I didn't know if I respected the media probably the way I should have, and I just always was like, oh, I don't like, who is this guy criticizing me? Like, like that guy never played, or even worse, be like, that guy wasn't very good, and who's he to criticize me? So I was like, there's no way I would ever do that. But I had an opportunity. I get invited by a friend of mine, said, I think you'd be good at it. He actually worked in the industry. He works for the NFL Network, and he said, would you want to call a game? Like, I think you can try it, you get your feet wet, see if you like it. He said, it's an NFL Europe game. And I was like, sure, why not? I'm like, tell me more about it. He's like, it's NFL Europe. He's like, it's Barcelona versus Rhine, like the Rhine Fire, Barcelona Dragons, Rhine. I'm like, where is it? He's like, Barcelona. I was like, sign me up. I'll take the free trip. I'll see if I like broadcasting. I'm done. So I signed it up. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yep, lock me in. So he's like, I'll get you the travel details tomorrow. So I get this email from NFL Network from like this assistant, and she says, I'm ready to book your travel. Like, where are you going? Where are you coming from? And I was like, oh, Florida. And I'm like, am I flying to Barcelona? Is there direct? Do I get first class? And she's like, I thought you knew. She's like, you actually call the game remotely from New Jersey at the NFL Film Studios. So I was like, wait a second, what happened to my trip to Europe? But I was like, all right, I made the commitment. So I flew up to New Jersey, called the game from the studio. Like, there's all these TVs. We watched it live as it unfolded, but it was really weird, like to watch a game and just call it on TV. But I got some good feedback from it, went back to Florida, so I got some good feedback from that. From that experience, somebody read about it. A local radio station asked me to do some local radio for the Miami Dolphins, like pregame show. And this is probably after I had been out 3 or 4 years in the league. And I was like, all right, and I was like, let me see how this goes. So I started doing local radio, really enjoyed it. Again, like got good feedback. Like people were saying, hey, I think you can be good at this. People in the business. So I was like, all right. So I had that encouragement. Then I hired an agent and said, hey, what can I do? And then it became like, all right, I think I can be good at this. My competitive nature was like, all right, how good can I be at this? How can I become the best at this? How can I become a ESPN and get to the top of this? And that's when, like, right around then was I started calling games. My first year calling games at ESPN was on ESPN3, which was the internet, like internet only games. I did 8 of them. I made $800 a game. Didn't make hardly any money, but it was really the best thing for me because I was awful, calling games, but nobody saw them. And after every single game, I'd ask my producer, be like, hey, what did I do good? What did I do bad? What can I fix? And so I kind of use that as a training ground to, become better. And I think that happens a lot because in every company is like, not just ESPN, but if you have a Hall of Fame jacket or if you have a Super Bowl ring, like, you're going to get right to the top. But if you don't, if you're somebody like me who was a journeyman and wasn't very good in the NFL and, had a decent career in college, you're probably going to have to prove yourself a lot more. But that for me was good because I've seen so many guys, and I would name them, but you probably figure it out yourself. I don't want to sell them out. But they get put right on the best shows, and they're not very good. Like, they suck, and they don't last. Like, their broadcasting career is over in a year or two because they weren't prepped. Like, there's no training school. There's no program that they can go and learn. It's just like, here you go do it. And there's a lot of high expectation on people to just go out there and succeed. So for me, it probably really protected my career. I'm able to lay a solid foundation where it allowed me to be bad with nobody watching early.
I mean, that's crazy. Like, what do you think you'd be doing now if you didn't do that Barcelona game and you didn't get into broadcasting?
I don't know. I had talked to my wife about commercial real estate. I got my real estate license like in this whole time. I actually met with more investment companies. Like, I met with legitimate. So we had tried a startup, and then I met with some companies. I met with JP Morgan. I met with a local Merrill Lynch office, and I was thinking about doing that. I didn't love that business though. For me, it was really hard to ask people for their money. Like, I know it's kind of normal for a lot of people just to say, hey, I'll manage your money. I'll invest it for you. For me, I'm not very good. I'm not a salesman. Like, I'm not good at like schmoozing people. And I know from being on the other side, like, you're like, oh, this guy just wants to be friends because he wants my money. Like, I'm sure you know that feeling pretty well. And I don't like feeling that way. So I liked developing friendships, but I didn't like having to close the deal. And so I knew that wasn't going to be it. I met with, my dad's a doctor. I was pre-med my first 2 years at Florida State. So I actually met with like the dean of the medical school at Nova Southeastern. It's a school in Fort Lauderdale. And I actually, at 32, 33 years old, I thought about going to medical school and like trying to become a doctor. But again, much like the head coaching route, I'm like, do I really want to for 10 years, like go to school with no return, no rewards, not making any money? Like, I mapped that out and was like, man, it'd be really close. Like, can I survive? My dad was all fired up. He's like, I'll help you, whatever you need, I'll help you do it. But ultimately I was like, I don't think I can do it. So who knows? Who the heck knows what I would have been doing if this hadn't worked out? But even now, like, I'm still young, and who knows? Like, the shelf life of this, like, this was a wake up call for me, where I'm starting to kind of look at other stuff too. Like, maybe I should start dabbling in something else besides broadcasting in case this doesn't work. Like, let me have something to fall back on, because I didn't do that in the NFL, and it was kind of took me a while to recover from that, and I don't want that to happen again in broadcasting. So I don't know. It's something that's kind of been in the back of my mind. I've talked to my wife about it too. Like, all right, let's start to, maybe have a plan B just in case. Because it's a scary feeling to be like, hey, I'm only 42 and I got, all this years left where I need to provide for my family. And in broadcasting, much like the NFL, once you're out, you're out. Like, there's no, oh, you can just move on to the next company. Like, you start getting old fast in this business. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's just like playing in the NFL. There's
Yep.
guys retiring every year that want to take all the gigs. So it's the same
Yep.
thing.
Yep, no doubt.
Did you? That made me think. If you would have gone back to med school, just right about now, you'd be a full-fledged doctor.
Right? I mean, I would just be like going to the hospital for my first round of surgery right now. And I don't know. I'm pretty sure we wouldn't be able to afford the house that we're in right now. So I don't know. But there is something like that's one thing I'm very like. My dad is my best friend. He's like my hero, my mentor, all that stuff. But I look at him. He's 77, still works, and he still loves what he does. And he also, it's very rewarding. Like, he helps people. Like, that's pretty damn cool. Like to be able to help people live a better life, to help heal them. Like that was the thing and that's one of the things that I thought about coaching, like going to college coaching. Like that to me would be more enticing for me to be a coach. Wouldn't be to make the money. I mean, money would be a big part of it. I mean, you'd be lying if you didn't. But more than winning championships, I would love to have the opportunity to like help shape young men's careers. Like the way that I saw Bobby Bowden do it, the way I saw Mark Richt do it. Like they were a father figure to so many guys that came through that program. And I think that'd be very cool and very rewarding. And I think that's a big part of what great coaches, that's what drives them. Not, because I think you see a lot of coaches who are driven strictly by money, strictly by, I want to get to the top, I'll do whatever it takes. But the coaches that care about their players is something that I admire, and that if I was going to go that route would make it very attractive to me.
Do you have any like broadcasting gigs or goals that you like? What was your favorite, if you perfect world, your favorite show? Would it be having a studio show every day on TV, being with Regis and Kelly? What would it be?
Yeah, that would be a good one. I think at this point, like it's what's crazy is, and Russillo and I did a segment on this one time where he was like, he just spurred the moment was like, "What's your dream job?" And I was like, I kind of have it. Like, and I felt that way when I was at ESPN because I got to be a part of a studio with college football, got to have my own radio show, which was televised on TV, and it was a sweet gig. Like, I love that. So I would say my goal, like in the near-term future, is to try to get as close to that as possible. And maybe it doesn't happen all under one umbrella company the way it did at ESPN, but I would love to have a radio show where it's televised, where there's a national audience. And I'm getting that on Sirius, which is great. I'm very thankful for that opportunity. But to open it up more where I can do more than just college football and college sports, which we're doing on there. Because I love the NFL, I love baseball, the NBA. I am a sports fan and I enjoy that. College football will always be what I'm known for and my passion. But I still love sports. I still love watching everything that's out there. So I still would love that. And then, it's funny because, I've had some desire to be sort of a personality in TV. But I don't know, man. I do feel like I'm getting old and like, hey, man, at what point does that kind of cross the line? Like Strahan has the dream gig, like I think every player that looks at him is probably like, I'd love to be that guy. But he's a unique talent, man. But being able to do the NFL Fox show, to be able to do Good Morning America, to be able to do that, like it's a fun gig. Like you have a lot of fun doing that. So I don't know. I haven't thought much past of, all right, immediate future, I want to get back to where I was. But I'm always like, I think it's fun to try new things, to challenge yourself, to think outside the box. So who knows? I don't know what the next step would be.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting thing. It really is. It's great. I didn't realize that you kind of had this period of time between when you're playing and the investment, the startup and everything. I guess I just assumed because I've seen you on TV for so many years and I watched you play at Florida State. I grew up loving Florida State. And I felt like, natural, just transitioned into it. I didn't know you had this buffer time in between.
Right. Well, that's what I'm jealous, too, of guys like you. Because you've had the podcast. Did you start the podcast while you were playing?
Yeah, I started, yeah.
So I'm really jealous. Like, that was a genius move on your part because you're so far ahead of the game. And you see guys like JJ Redick's got his podcast. Like, much more players now are starting to prepare for life after the game, and it just sets you up so much better. Like I was lost. I was like, what am I going to do? And it kind of fell into broadcasting. But that's the advice I have for guys now. Because a lot of guys now are starting to say, I want to be a broadcaster. I'm like, do as much as you can, get as many reps as you can, because that's a big part of it, is just getting repetitions, being able to do it. And while you're still a player, you'll never have as many requests of your time and opportunities to be on camera, to get practice just talking to a camera. So take advantage of it. That's why I think you're so far ahead of the game already. Just being a year or two out, is you've already done it. So you've already got those reps, and so that's why you're better than I was at your turn. Your part in the game. That's why you'll be able to progress really fast through this business, because you've already got those reps, which is a genius move. Like I wish I had been smart enough and aware enough to try to do those things.
Well, I should have started sooner. So I didn't realize. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. Honestly, I wanted to be a cop forever. I was a criminology major. So like probably 6 years into the league, I was like, I think I would like to. I said I want to call games. I think I'd really enjoy it. I went to broadcast boot camp, and I knew right then, I'm like, this is what I want to do for sure. And before that, I would only do any interviews or any appearance. Like they'd say, "Oh, what you want to come down on Super Bowl week and you can make the rounds and do all the shows?" I'm like, why would I ever want to do that? Like
Right.
I thought that my first like 4 or 5 years. I'm like, no way, because I didn't think I wanted to go into this. And then once I realized I wanted to, I was like, well, yeah, of course. And so I would go do all the rounds and go on Cowherd and Jim Rome and do all the shows, and I really enjoyed it. While I was doing that, I was basically asking them, just peppering them with questions, getting their emails, and asking them how can I get better? What should I do? And they're always, what's cool is like people were always very open and very like they love giving advice and telling people like they definitely know like what you can't do. And they are the same thing with broadcasting. It's like, hey, you need to approach this like you did football. Like you can't just show up. And I know that 100%. People take it for granted. I think when they see great people on TV, they think, oh, well, they're just showing up talking ball. Isn't that what we all do?
Right.
Like, no.
It's a rude awakening when you do it. But think about, I just mentioned those guys that have podcasts, but think about guys like Ryan Clark, who started doing studio for ESPN. Now he's got a full-time gig with them. Brandon Marshall is already ahead of the game doing the show, the Showtime show. And now he's got something to transition to when he's done. Josh Norman, like so many guys are doing TV ahead of time where that's even becoming more competitive. Like it used to be, only a handful of guys wanted to do that. Now guys have their agents calling saying, get me on TV. But I think what you hit on is what separates the guys who are able to last are the guys that do what it takes. And there's not a ton of money in it early. That's, I think, what weeds out a lot of guys too. Because I think guys look at it like, man, I got to do all this work. I got to be there this much time. I got to travel this, and they've already made millions of dollars. They're like, do I really want to do this? So that weeds out a ton of guys. But the guys that really take advantage of it while they're still playing are so far ahead of the game. They're gonna knock it out of the park, like those guys I mentioned have.
Yeah, they really are. Now I got one final question just hit me. I just wonder, like, so with college athletes, do you think they should be paid? And if so, how do we go about that?
So I've kind of evolved.
Now I know you. I'm sorry to cut you off. I know you've actually hit on this before, but I'm interested because I'm trying to figure out in my head. I'm like, well, of course they should be paid, but I don't know how that works.
So you think, of course, they should be paid? So here's what I would say.
Well, I think they are getting paid, but just not by the schools.
Yes, that's true. But they also are getting paid now a stipend, which we didn't get. So they're getting a few $1,000 a semester, which I would have loved when I was playing. I vividly recall going to the ATM and getting out like $20 and being like, oh man, how much? I only have 20 more in there. Like, what am I going to do? And I came from a nice background. Like I was spoiled compared to most guys. I mean, I mentioned my dad was a doctor, but he made sure not to spoil me. Like I didn't have just unlimited funds. But I've seen guys struggle. I've seen guys, struggle to get, take a girl out for a date. So I've seen a lot of that up front, up close and personal, but I don't want to lose sight of it's still an amateur game. Like I don't want it to become the NFL. So how do we do that, but still give guys a piece of the pie? So one of those things I think we should, and the other thing I want is to make sure that, because I was a two-sport athlete, so I played baseball at Florida State as well. So I saw, hey, I put in a lot of time in football, but I also saw the baseball players put in a lot of time. And then you go in there and you see the women's tennis team and the girls soccer team and all these other sports, they're putting in just as much time as the football team is. They're competing like it's a job. They have a 20-hour rule. Like they're extending that as well. So they're putting in a lot of work. So I don't want to lose sight of what they're doing. So I feel like if you're going to pay football and basketball, I would like it to be where you can still pay all those non-revenue earning sports or pay them the same. So they're getting the stipend, all those sports, basketball, football, but also women's sports, baseball players, like anybody who's getting a full scholarship gets those stipends. So I think that's a good thing. I think you try to increase that as much as you can each year. I think you go for full cost of attendance. Like guys should get stuff they need. Cell phone, like they should get cell phones. Like it's just a kind of a common use today. They should get iPads. Like whatever you need for college, you should get paid for. So then you still have a discrepancy, right? Coaches are making $7-8 million. Players are making a few $1,000 a semester. So there's a discrepancy there. So how do you make up for that? That's the one where I'm okay that there's a discrepancy because of the sacrifices the coaches make. Like I do feel like they're worth more to the school. They just are. Like just like when I was at ESPN, John Skipper made all the money. He's the guy that runs it. Like there's a hierarchy in every walk of life. Like some guys make a ton, some guys don't. You might work for the same company, but they don't. You don't make the same money. I've kind of come around to being to the point of, all right, maybe we go to the Olympic model, which is you can make money off your likeness. You could go, you could sign up for a commercial, you could sign autographs, you could do these types of things. But it makes me nervous because of a couple things. One, the recruiting aspect. Like I think that, and it's already shady, so maybe you just make it legit. Because I guarantee you there would be some car dealer that would say, all right, to a high school kid, we'll give you $250,000 to come shoot a commercial for us, or whatever they would call it. And then you basically could buy guys like that. Is that the worst thing in the world? Maybe not. Maybe, kids get paid $250,000. I don't know. The other thing that worries me is the discrepancy you would have in that locker room of some guys would be able to make that $250,000, and then you'd have another guy who's not making anything. Like, how does that sit in a locker room? I don't know. Maybe that's something that we shouldn't worry about. Like it happens in the NFL locker rooms. Some quarterbacks are making $25 million. The guy sitting next to him is making $500, or league minimum. But I don't know. And then what do you do? Like, I don't know. There's so much more to it. It's so complex. Like, that's what drives me crazy is when people say, we've got to pay the players. We need to pay the players. What does that look like? How does that? Because I have a fear that if you paid the players officially from the schools and they had to pay them salaries and there was a minimum like the NFL, all those non-revenue sports would start to go away because they'd have to fund the football and basketball programs. So it's a really complicated issue. There is no answer. I think it's come a long way in the last 5-10 years. I think it's getting better. There's never been a better time to be a college athlete, and I think it's continuing to get better. But, there's still a lot of issues that the NCAA has to deal with.
Yeah, that made me think it would be like the NFL then, to where the starting quarterback's getting paid more than his quarterback coach.
Yeah, and it gets weird. And I think a lot of coaches want to fight that. Now, I don't think it would ever get to that point because no matter what endorsement deal you could find or how many autographs you could sign, you're not going to make as much as, I don't think any coach. I don't think the money would be that serious.
I don't know. Have you ever think about, well, you're Florida State. I know at Ohio State, if they, like, let's say I was at school with Troy Smith when he won the Heisman, I'm sure he could find a way to make $200,000 doing autograph signings and doing appearances.
Yeah, which would be more than his quarterback coach. I didn't catch you say that. You're right. It would be the position coach would be close. You'd never make more than your head coach.
Yeah.
But because I was there with Charlie Ward, same thing. He won the Heisman. I saw people requesting money, not money, requesting autographs from him nonstop. Here's the thing I would say, because I don't think the money that would be made from this, I don't know how many guys would be able to truly capitalize like $200,000. I think a lot of guys could make a few $1,000s. But they're already getting that in a stipend. Is it worth blowing up the system as we know it just so Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield and Josh Rosen and Sam Darnold can make $50,000 to $100,000? Is it worth blowing up the entire system? Because all those guys I just mentioned, they're probably going to get paid in the NFL. Like, they just have to wait a little bit, and most of them are protected with insurance, so they will get paid. Like, that's one of my big things too is, you'll probably, if you're good enough, you'll eventually be a millionaire. And then somebody will come back and say, what about Mark Lattimore? What about, and Todd Gurley was an example that people use because he tore his ACL. Well, he returned, he recovered, he's balling out still for that, so I don't know. I just look at it and be like, if you're good enough, you're probably going to get paid eventually. It's just like you got to wait your turn.
It's a good point. Yeah, man. We'll see. We'll keep our eye on it. See how it goes. Very complex, but Danny, appreciate you coming on here, man. Wanted to have you on for a while. I will. I'm going to put this up here in a couple of days. We'll post it, but I will see you in a few days for the game we are going to be calling here. We're going to be at Texas Tech, so most people probably listen to this after the game. But we get to go see old Cliff Kingsbury and take on Iowa State. Man, Iowa State looks. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen some. Iowa State looks legit.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a fun game. Like, there'll be a lot of offense, a couple teams, trying to get over that hump. So it should be fun, man. I'm having fun working with you. Can't wait.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be fun. All right, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, and I will see you soon.
You got it.
We're glad you could join us for today's conversation. After you subscribe to the show, head over to thehawkcast.com or reach out to AJ directly on Twitter at @officialAJHawk to recommend future guests that will help us inspire people to keep talking. Thanks again, and we look forward to speaking with you next time on the HawkCast.